Hello, I will be reading Chapter 3 of The Journey Back. Chapter 3 is running. Did you ever wake up in the morning and not know what day it was? That's what it was like for me. Except I had a lot more to figure out than just the day. I didn't know where I was, or at first, even who I was. All I knew is that it was dark. I was running out of oxygen, it smelled bad, and something smushed against my face. Did I fall down a black hole to hell? Was I buried alive? What? Slowly, it dawned on me. Then, like the faucet suddenly got turned on, my whole life gushed out. I was Michael Griswold. Only everyone called me Digger. I had a mom and a little brother and sister back home who I loved a lot. I also had a father who drank and got mean. We lived in the country in a small yellow house with a toilet that didn't work and a lot of junk in the front yard. Old tires and parts of the trucks that my father drove. I was 14 years old, and I was in prison because I played a practical joke on the rich neighbor who bought my grandpa's farm. My grandpa is in a nursing home now, but it used to be, when things were bad at home, I could escape to grandpa's. That's why I hated Mr. D'Angelo so much. He was the snooty guy who bought grandpa's farm, tore the house down, then built a mansion there so he could show off how much money he had. One day, he even kicked me and my friends off his property. So I played a joke on the a-hole, only the joke went sour, and his little boy died. For a minute there, the memory stopped. It was like hitting a wall. Everything stopped for me when I thought back on what I'd done. Which is why I tried not to think back on it. What good did it do? I couldn't undo the past. I went to prison for my crime. But now I needed to get home. So I escaped in a garbage truck, which is how I came to be squashed beneath a ton of garbage. The sound of a distant siren pierced the air. I knew if I didn't crawl out of the garbage and disappear, I'd be right back where I came from, with even more time ahead of me. I made a huge push with everything I had and created a tiny space with enough room to wiggle my toes. That was good. Next, I moved my feet up and down. Then I started clawing at those slimy bags with my bare hands and slowly inched my way upward. I was like a low-life worm crawling out of the garbage. Pushing, wriggling, crawling, and kicking. I kept at it until my head popped through into the air and sunlight hit my face. I groaned from the force of one more all-out effort and, breathless, tumbled out and down a huge slide chute of slick garbage bags. When I landed at the bottom of that trash mountain, I took a minute to suck in big gulps of air, so much that I thought I'd crack my ribs. It wasn't exactly fresh, but let me tell you, it was better than anything at the bottom of that pile. The siren grew louder. Definitely time to get going. The sun was bright and directly overhead, so I figured it must have been around noon. Surely, they were on to me now, because I had split just after breakfast. Looking around, I didn't see anyone else at the landfill. Dense woods surrounded the place, but I spotted a gravel road that led in and out. The best thing I decided was to stick to the woods, but parallel to the road so I didn't get totally lost. My legs were cramped up from being crushed by all that garbage, but I hobbled away, and as soon as I got the kinks worked out of my muscles, I started running. My boots weren't exactly great for cross-country, but I ignored the heaviness and ran like a jackrabbit until I was deep in the forest. I stopped once to take off my sweatshirt because I was sweating buckets, tied the sweatshirt around my waist, and kept going. I jumped over logs, plunged full force through briars, sprinted uphill, and sidestepped quickly down a rocky hillside like a mountain goat. I could feel a stone in my left boot, but I didn't stop to get it out. I trotted on through a patch of pine trees where the needles made a soft carpet, slugged through a muddy swamp that tried to suck my boots right off, then jogged through a high grass meadow until I came upon a shallow stream. The water looked clean, so I lay down on the ground and took a long, cold drink. While I had my face in the water, it dawned on me that the police might try to track me on land, and that I might be better by walking up the stream. It was right then, before I plunged my feet in the stream, that I heard the helicopter overhead. Thump a 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 thump. That would be the state police looking for me. Glancing around, I spotted a bunch of juniper bushes nearby, then dashed up the hillside and threw myself beneath the prickly branches. I knew a little about those helicopters because my old friend Brady had a cousin Carl who was a paramedic. Carl took us with him one day to the state police barracks in Centerville to see a state chopper that was parked there. It was a twin-engine Duofine Eurocopter, and we actually got to sit inside. This guy, the pilot who actually flew choppers in Vietnam, explained all the controls and showed us that special camera underneath the helicopter nose. It was called FLIR, FLIR, which stands for Forward-Looking Infrared. I never forgot that because the camera was so cool. What it did, it could tell temperature differences on the ground, and things would show up black and white on this little screen in the cockpit. Like a human body, it was warm, right? So the camera would pick up that a warm body was on the ground, and flash an image to the pilot. Even if it was dark out, the camera could do this. I dug myself in as best as I could, hoping the camera couldn't get a picture of me if I was curled up in a tight little ball beneath the thick bushes. That, or else they'd figure I was an animal or something. Lying there, making myself as small as possible by hugging my arms and legs, I listened as the chopper noise grew louder and louder, finally passing directly overhead. I lay still, barely breathing until the helicopter's sound grew further, fainter, like a distant heartbeat in the sky. I didn't want to take the chance of getting spotted, so I decided to hide out for a while, hidden by the bushes. I sat up and took off one boot to shake a stone out. Then I took off the other boot too, and peeled off my socks so they could dry out a little. Everything was wet and muddy from sloshing through that swamp. I saw big blisters on my feet, but there wasn't anything I could do for them, so after a while I put my damp socks back on in case I had to leave in a hurry. About that time, I realized how hungry I was and felt for the box of Cocoa-Roos in my pocket. But I decided I'd better save them for when I was really starving. In my other pocket, I found a balled-up Kleenex and my white card. I took the card out and was getting ready to flick it into the water down below. But then I realized that the card could float downstream and become a clue. I held it in my hand and looked at it. They gave us that card the first day we signed in at Cliffside. It was about 4 inches by 4 inches and laminated so we could keep it in our pocket all the time. We were told to memorize it, all the tiny print front and back. Like we had to recite the 12 problem areas us boys fall into in the 4 most common thinking errors we make, plus a whole lot of other stuff so we could change our ways. I knew the whole thing, memorized it the first week just for something to do. With my eyes closed, I could repeat the entire card starting top left with those 12 problem areas. Low self-image, easily angered, inconsiderate to others, aggravates others, authority problem, alcohol or drug problem, stealing, lying, etc. Yep, I must have gone over that list a dozen times with Miss Laurie, my mental health counselor. I liked Miss Laurie. She was pretty. With long dark hair she pulled back into a ponytail. She wore pink fingernail polish and interesting earrings, always something dangly. And she smelled good too. First 2 days I was in her office, I didn't say a thing, and she didn't care. She said it was okay to just sit there if I wanted. She offered me candy from her jar, and I took a piece, a little Hershey bar. I sat there eating chocolate and watching the angelfish swim around in their tanks for a full hour. Anything we talk about in here stays here, Miss Laurie told me. I don't report back to juvenile detention. But I still didn't talk. She did paperwork while I watched the fish and picked at a hangnail. Along about the 3rd or 4th time, Miss Laurie played a game of cards with me and talked about her little boy Harrison. and how he painted himself with magic markers. I couldn't help it. Her story reminded me of my little brother Hank, and how he drew pictures all over himself with an ink pen, so he'd look like my tattooed Uncle Chip. I cracked up remembering that. Guess that's when I started to talk to her some. Mostly about Hank and Leanne at first, then my mom, and finally my dad. We also talked about the 12 problem areas. My response was always the same. I told Miss Laurie I was only guilty of 3 of those areas. Easily angered, no question, and I did occasionally aggravate others, but only after they aggravated me. And yes, I told her, I was guilty of misleading others. No question how I led my friend JT down the wrong path, which landed both of us in prison. I told JT I was sorry and that it wasn't his fault. I told the judge that too in court. I spoke up and said JT didn't do nothing. That I did everything myself, but the judge, she wasn't even looking at me when I said all that. She was busy writing in her folders. When she was done, she took off her glasses and stared at me. She said JT stood guard, which helped me commit the crime, so he was guilty too. There wasn't anything I could say or do to change her mind. Me and JT, we were put in this white prison van, just the 2 of us in the back, separated from the driver by a big wire grate. We had these heavy shackles on our feet and handcuffs too. But neither of us was going to try to escape or anything. We were like stunned that day. We were convicted and rode quiet all the way out to Western Maryland in the van. It took nearly 4 hours to get to Cliffside. There wasn't any music or anything to listen to. The driver had his radio on low, but it was just talk radio, religious stuff, and we couldn't hear it anyway except for an occasional "Praise the Lord" or "The Bible tells us." Wasn't a whole lot to look at neither. You couldn't look straight through the grate between us and the driver or you'd get cross-eyed. So all we could do was look out the side windows. I hadn't ever been all the way out to Western Maryland before, and I would have to say the countryside was nice, especially the hills. There weren't many hills I knew out on the eastern shore. A couple hours into the trip, the van climbed up this mountainside so steep my ears popped. Then we passed through the big slice in the top where huge cliffs rose above us on either side. Ain't it something, the driver called back to us while he drove between those multicolored cliffs. He turned his radio down. It's called Sidling Hill. Neither of us answered, but I didn't look out the window. See that black layer toward the bottom? Again, we didn't say anything, but the driver continued. I heard that black layer has got marine fossils in it, which means this area was underwater. A huge sea at one time. Yup. From eastern Ohio all the way to western Maryland. Imagine that. I did try to imagine that. Why not? I didn't have anything else to do. I wondered how come the sea disappeared, and how the floor of it ended up top of a mountain. I looked at the multicolored layers in those cliffs and wondered what stories each one had. Kind of wished the driver would say some more. But once we were through that pass and headed down the other side, he went back to chewing his tobacco and turned up his radio. I kept glancing at JT, who was sitting across from me, but he never once looked up, not even at the cliffs of Sidling Hill. He just stared at the floor the whole time, which was incredibly depressing. I had really ruined his life. At one point, a big tractor trailer full of logs roared past us, and I remember thinking I was just like one of those cut down trees, strapped onto the back of that truck with no power over my life anymore. Then we came across some guys in a bright green neon vests who were picking up trash in the median strip, and I saw a van parked alongside the road that had the words "inmate labor" on it. I wondered if that was my future. Would that be me one day, picking up trash by the road while other people drove by and stared? I dropped my head. I sure didn't want that for a future. Suddenly, there wasn't time to be thinking of my life, or that sad trip out to Western Maryland, because the sound of barking dogs brought me back to the present right quick. Instead of tossing the white card in the bushes, I slipped it back in my pocket and reached for my boots. And that's the end of chapter 3 of The Journey Back.